Alright, it's time to start another franchise. We're going to do a shorter one. We're going to do a trilogy, and that is the Warlock Trilogy by Vestron. I got the Blu-ray, and it looks pretty good. So, this was my second time watch. I watched it for the first time a few months ago for my 1989 ranking, and I haven't seen the second or third one yet, as of this recording. So, let's get into it. This one came out in 1989. This was directed by Steve Miner from Friday the 13th Part 2 and 3 and many other movies. And this was written by the guy who did Critters 2, my favorite Critters movie, and he wrote The Fugitive, and he wrote all those Vin Diesel, like, Riddick movies. I also recognize the stunt coordinator, David Ellis, who went on to direct Final Destination 2 and Final Destination 4, but for obvious reasons, they should have had Dick Warlock be the stunt coordinator. Now, this movie is about a warlock, shockingly enough, and it starts in the late 1600s, and he goes into the future 300 years to go retrieve these three pages from three separate locations, these uh, pages that are going to tell him God's real name. And if he can find out God's real name, he can, I guess, end the world or something. So this other guy from the 1600s goes into the future also to stop him, along with this girl, Cassandra, with a K. So, starting with my likes, I really like the humor in the movie. I like the whole like fish out of water scenario where you got a guy from the late 1600s going to modern day, like 1988. The movie takes place in 88. And he's just like kind of surprised by everything. He doesn't know what anything is, so he's just questioning things and calling cars coaches instead. And he's afraid of flying. He doesn't trust them. He doesn't know what the hell these airplanes are. So it's just that kind of stuff was really funny to me. I also really like the characters in the movie, and I really like the performances from the main two male leads, the ones who play the main protagonist and the antagonist, Julian Sands and Richard Grant, I think is their names, who play Redferne and the Warlock, who I don't think has a name. He's just a Warlock. I think they're portrayed pretty good, and I just like the chemistry and the banter between the main girl, Cassandra, and Richard Grant's character, Redferne. I like that in the first half of the movie, you got like this ticking clock situation where a woman has this rapid aging curse put on her where she's aging 20 years per day. Kind of like that movie that just came out, Old. It's even faster than that movie. So I just thought that was a really scary concept. And of course, they make it kind of ironic by setting up this character as someone who has a big like fear of growing old. She sees an old lady walking across the street and she's like, please God, don't ever let me get that old. Yet again, Jerry Goldsmith does a really good score. I really like the Warlock theme. And there's some sounds in the movie that kind of sound similar-ish to Poltergeist. Even though this movie is like over an hour and 45 minutes, it actually has a pretty good pace. It doesn't really slow down. It gets to the cat and mouse chase pretty quickly. And because the characters are engaging and I like their dialogue and their back and forth and just the humor in the film, it really just helps the movie click by. I like some of the effects, the practical effects towards the end in the graveyard scene, and I really like the end shot. I thought it was pretty clever. That's exactly what this character should be doing. So I thought it was a smart decision and a smart way to end the film. And also, this movie kills kids because in order to fly as a witch or a warlock, you gotta kill a kid, an unbaptized one. So I learned a lot about witches while watching this movie. So, but getting into my negatives, this movie's pretty light on horror. So this barely qualifies as a horror movie to me. I did have it on my top 10 of 1989 horror movies, but it's kind of light in that department. It feels more like a fantasy horror-ish, more of like an adventure comedy. There's hardly any horror, so I just wish they would have increased that a bit for my personal liking. Like you get one kind of graphic moment towards the very beginning, and then some stuff involving eyeballs, but it's not really all that graphic. It just kind of comes off as more silly. And this is just a little nitpick, but I do think some of the visual effects, some of the magic that the Warlock is performing in the movie with the flames coming out of his hands and shit does kind of age the film a bit. This movie does kind of age itself with some effects. And also on this watch, I noticed more than my first watch just how not that good the main girl's performance was. Like, she's fine, but I don't know, her delivery, it just came off as a bit too hokey. And I also just thought that her haircut was distractingly ugly. So I was glad when she got that curse put on her that made her hair grow longer and change color. I was like, thank you, that looks a lot better than what we saw before. She's a beautiful girl, don't get me wrong. It's the haircut. It was just driving me mad for some reason. I was just so distracted in every scene. I was like, oh my god, is that really, does she really think that looks good on her? No. So final thoughts, I think this is a pretty enjoyable, energetic cat and mouse chase adventure comedy with some fantasy horror elements thrown in. Uh, for fans of the witch genre, I can definitely recommend this to you. There's lots of witchery stuff going on, and also it's witty. It flies by, and it has some strong characters that I really liked. So when it comes to Warlock, I recommend that you go out and buy it. All right, spoiler discussion. So we start in 1691, and the Warlock is being held prisoner, and he is wearing not only handcuffs but toe cuffs. Didn't know these existed, but apparently the toes of Warlocks are like a power source to them. So we can't. I don't know, like why are his toes locked up again? I feel like they said, but we gotta keep those toes in check, so we gotta put some toe cuffs on those toes so they can't escape. Like, what the hell are they doing? I don't know why he's wearing toe cuffs, but and then so Warlock, he somehow, I guess, travels through time. Why exactly he has to travel to modern day, 1988, to find these pages? I mean, I don't know, like plot convenience. We gotta make it modern day, right? And I'm glad it's modern day because I'm not really a big fan of period piece films. But yeah, so how he has this ability, because he's a warlock, I guess, but how the other guy joined him, like he jumped into the portal with him and went to the future. Redferne, he somehow joined him in the future, but then somehow didn't land in the same place as him. Like, it's kind of like Terminator, where you find out they go through this portal, but for some reason, when they land in separate locations. The Terminator and the other dude, I forget his name, played by Michael Biehn. How come they land in different locations? So it's like when he lands in modern day, I'm like, well, where's the other guy? He went through it with him, so you would think they would both like crash in the same spot at the same time, but conveniently, like Redferne's somewhere else. So we find out that Cassandra, with a K, she has insulin that she has to keep taking, and she has a fear of aging, all this stuff being set up for the end. So Cassandra, she has a gay roommate, and he chops off his finger. It's like the one somewhat gory moment in the movie, and then he starts kissing him and sucks his tongue right out of his mouth for some reason. I guess to make him stop screaming. He probably had an erection during that. Like, ooh, what's going on here? Making out with me, and then tongue sucked right out. And then the actress Mary Woronov from a lot of horror movies back in the day, she plays like a fake medium, and her face for some reason has to like disfigure and change and morph into like a demon face when she's being possessed. And so then like he takes her eyeballs out, and for some reason they look all yellow. Like, those looked pretty fake. It was just kind of a bad effect. I love how Redferne, when he sees the cops, he just walks out with his whip, bringing a whip to a gunfight, but they break out the taser and tase his ass. But I did think it was kind of interesting how he knew that they were trouble. Like, when he hears the sirens and he looks out, he sees the cops pulling up, he didn't seem all that confused by the sight of cars. But this is hours later, so maybe he's already had that moment of confusion seeing the cars and shit that we didn't get to see. But I just thought he should have been more like confused in that moment, but he seemed to know that trouble was approaching and went out with his whip like, all right, let's do this. So we find out that one of the 3 locations for the Bible pages is in her dining room table. It's in her table, and so he finds this pretty quickly. Like, as soon as he gets to the 1988, he crashes through the window. Like, he knows that the Bible pages are there, and then he knows that the second location is at like this barn in the next state over, I think. And then, but by the third act, when he's trying to find the third pages, he needs to like, threaten women and ask for the location of the third one. How come he doesn't know where the third location is? Like, he has to follow the main two characters to Boston, and then he has to like beat around people like, tell me where the third location is. Like, shouldn't you know? You have those two eyeballs that are like telling you where to go. Like, how come he didn't know exactly where the third location was? He knew where the first two were, got there pretty quickly, but needed help getting to the third one and finding the exact location for. I didn't understand that. I didn't understand why he needed to fly in the airplane to get to Boston. How come he couldn't just fly? We see him flying down the road at 90 miles an hour, but then he has to get into an airplane to fly to Boston instead of just flying himself. But maybe he just didn't want to abuse that power. Is it just tiresome to fly? Like he just didn't want to do it? I don't know. Like, did he lose that power? Clearly not, because he flies out of the airplane when they land. So why did he choose to fly like everybody else? So he puts an aging spell on her, and she's aging 20 years per day. And by morning, her hair has grown like 5 feet long. Her nails are very long, but she cuts it. But then by like the next day, her hair is very long again. But the whole insulin thing's never a problem. You would think, I'm not sure how. I don't take insulin, but wouldn't she be like suffering from a lot of like side effects if she hasn't been taking her insulin for 20 years? Like, did she just not need it no more? Is that something that you can just like one day no longer need? Maybe you need it for your first 20 some years on Earth, but then you just at some point don't need insulin anymore. Like she would need to take that shot more frequently if time in her body is going by much more quicker. Like her body's aging 20 years per day. She would need like an insulin shot like every fucking like 5 minutes or some shit, right? Like I don't know. I don't know how that would work, but I was just expecting her to be like suffering from like whatever side effects there would be. So the Amish dude or Mennonite, whatever, like he starts seeing like all these signs that the place has been like cursed. There's a hex, so he draws a hex mark on the outside of the barn. Like for who? Like he knew? Was he waiting for Redferne? It seemed like he was expecting him when he showed up. He wasn't even like confused by their presence there. He was just like, "Oh yeah, this way. Yeah, I drew that for you to see." Like, what? Like, was he waiting for them? I don't get it. I thought it was just really funny how in this movie they explained that if you nail a hammer into the warlock's footprints in the sand or the dirt, it actually affects him wherever he's at. So she's like hammering nails into the dirt on the ground, and then we hear him in the distance screaming, like the nails actually being driven into his actual foot. I just thought that was really funny and interesting. And also, she gets the bracelet back, so therefore the curse is automatically taken off of her. And unfortunately, she gets her very distracting, ugly haircut back. Another little moment that kind of confused me in the movie was the whole airport scene where she's buying the plane tickets, and when the lady's not looking, she unplugs the credit card machine, and then the chick's like, "Oh, it's not working," and then they just kind of hard cut to them walking through security. Like, what was that for? Did they get the plane tickets for free just because she unplugged the machine? Like, oh, it's not working, it's out of order. I guess we just get to go to Boston for free now. What was that for? What was she distracting her from? Like, I didn't get that at all. You don't get free plane tickets just because you unplug the damn machine. They would just go to the next one or plug it back in. She would find out what the problem is pretty quickly. Like, oh, it's not plugged in. Plug it back in. Swipe the credit card. Like, I guess maybe her credit card's declined and she knows that, so she's trying to like prevent her from knowing by unplugging it. But that doesn't give you free plane tickets. I don't get this. I think the thing that ages this movie the most is the fact that we see a guy smoking on an airplane. That would never happen today on any airplane, unless it's a private jet you're flying. Now, I thought priests couldn't get married, couldn't have sex, but this guy has a wife, and she's pregnant. So, what gives? Am I wrong? I'm not a very religious man, but that's just always what I've heard. So I guess I'm wrong, or this movie fucked up. We get kind of a Bride of Chucky moment where he falls on top of his own corpse at the graveyard, which just kind of made me chuckle, his reaction to his own dead body. But this is where it gets kind of convoluted to me. Like, time travel shit doesn't make sense to me. I'm going to try to explain what I mean, but it's probably not going to work. I'm not good at explaining shit. But if he's in the future and he's never died, would his body even be there in that coffin? Like, what if he died right now in 1988 his body would have never been buried in the first place for him to bump into. Like, you get what I mean? Like, it doesn't make sense. So then the Warlock, he gets the last page, he knows God's real name, he's about to say it and bring an end to the world, basically, and the chick, Cassandra, with a K, she sneaks up, hits him with an insulin shot, and because it's, salt, apparently, witches and warlocks, they don't like salt, it kills them. His veins start to, like, bulge, and then he starts melting, it spontaneously combusts, he, like, ignites into flames, and turns into a skeleton, and I thought all that stuff looked kind of cool. And then his, like, skull on the ground starts to move, like he's still alive somehow. Like, get the fuck out of here. And then, yeah, he gets his skull crushed, and then the chick, Cassandra, I keep forgetting her name, Cassandra, she takes the pages and she buries them in salt, in a big old salt deposit. So I thought that was really smart. Now, how exactly did Redferne get back to the past? Did he take a DeLorean? Did he, what did he do? Like, he's not the Warlock, he's just a normal guy, right? How did he, like, as soon as he accomplishes his task, he, like, turns into a fucking tornado and then goes back to the 1600s. How did he do that? Who's causing that? Him? Some other guy? Like, who's doing this? I don't understand that. He's not a Warlock, so how is he going back into the past? So that's the end of the movie. Let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. Is it the best of the trilogy? Should I be looking forward to part 2 and 3 or be dreading it? Let me know. And as always, if you like what you've seen here, you can hit this like button and become a subscriber today just by clicking on my cartoon face in about 5 seconds. And remember, it's just an opinion. You don't need to get butthurt about it.